This conference will now be recorded.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us again. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Steve Romig, the host for the DIGFM meeting here once a month. This is our second virtual meeting. I don't know how many more we're going to have, but my suggestion would be, if you haven't already, put yourself on mute so we can have all of our attention focused on Tony, for better or for worse. I'm sure he wants all the attention he can get. Tony's here to talk about some fun FileMaker facts. I think the abbreviation for that is And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony. And before I begin, Tony, before you begin, would you rather be interrupted with questions in chat, or would you rather do all the questions at the end?
I like inline questions.
Okay. So for those of you who have any questions along the way, why don't you go ahead and type them into chat, and either Eric or myself, when it's convenient, will interrupt Tony, unless Tony sees them himself, to answer your questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tony.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for having me back. And in alphabetical order, thank you, Eric, Steve, and Vince, for helping put this show together. And with that, I'm going to jump around a little bit, be a little bit free form. And just like the presentation from last year, I'm going to do my best to kind of have something for everybody. You know, beginner, intermediate, maybe if I'm lucky, I'll come up with something expert. So let me sort of set it up a little bit. First, I do want to point at the page that I built for last year's presentation. What I like to do with a video presentation is I like to make this timestamp links. So like this was a 2-hour long thing, and we covered a lot of topics. So this page will let you click on anything and then jump straight to that topic. So if there was like, you know, oh yeah, what was the part about this? You can just get there real quickly. And I'm going to try and do the same thing. Not try, I'm going to, there's no try, only do. I'm going to do the same thing, although I don't know if it's going to take me a week, a day, or 2 weeks, but I'll do a page for this presentation, taking the video. Okay, and there's a link to this in the chat, which I think will go up on this page. And I'll also be looking at this page for any follow-up questions and whatnot. All right, so that's that page, all right, so Fun FileMaker Facts. So thematically, what I'm gonna do today is we have something called Fun FileMaker Facts, and I'm gonna just bring one up onto the screen. A little bit of a zoom here. All right, and I'm not gonna go for, we tested this earlier, and I think that shows up pretty well for most people. It's pretty big on this, so it should work on, even someone watching this on an iPad should be able to see that. So what is a Fun FileMaker fact? We decided at some point that it would be useful to produce these relatively small form factor FileMaker, like tips and tricks kind of things. And the form factor was designed to fit into the email, well, multiple places, but one, for instance, was the email that we send out for the New York FileMaker Pro user group. And just for anyone who's listening to this who is running a user group, if you ever want to use these, you can. We purposely didn't put our branding on, like if someone was sending a newsletter, HTML newsletter, and wanted to include these, we did put them in there partly to kind of get people to click the link. And yes, that does mean that we can see who opened the email, but we kind of got a kick out of seeing, you know, who's reading the emails. So that was one reason. This form factor fits really well on Twitter and also Community, and a blog post. You know, they just fit a lot of different places. So what we do, it's sort of a monthly commitment, because that's a manageable, sustainable commitment. So I just heard a noise and I was just seeing if there was a chat. So so every month, myself and my coding partner, we say, hey, what do you want the Fun FileMaker fact to be? And we debate a little bit, and then we pick one, and it goes from being an idea to something that is both an idea and it's a little bit arts and craftsy, visually appealing. So what I'm going to do is relatively simplistic, and I would absolutely welcome anyone who wants to, comment, because I'm going to use these as starting points to riff off. Obviously, actually, let me add one more piece. So what we do on a month, we pick one feature of the FileMaker platform, and usually because of the audience, unlike the presentation last year, which I would say potentially was pretty, certainly intermediate, maybe expert overview of the FileMaker platform. These are sort of targeted to a different demographic, because of who we sent, because this was initially something to go out to the New York FileMaker Pro user group, which is a mixture of developers and power users and maybe some beginners, right? So we wanted to kind of, pitch it at that level. So with that all said, and yes, once again, feel free to jump in. I'm going to just walk through these, the ones that are already out, and then after that, I've got some that are kind of in the kitchen, so to speak, and give you a little look behind the curtain. And I'll go with the first one. I'm going to go chronologically. So our premiere maiden voyage with the Fun FileMaker fact, which, by the way, nice alliteration, was a little bit of a shout out to Anchor Buoy. And by the way, one of the things I want to say is that when we do these, we try and sort of, even though it's a small space, we try and embed multiple concepts. Like if we can get, one or two or three different ideas into a single Fun FileMaker fact, we feel like it's been a good month then. So what do we got here? Well, we do have an Anchor Buoy set up, although we're not shouting out Anchor Buoy. I guess the primary thing that we're shouting out is this colorful thing, this concept, which is right here in writing. So I will say that there's at least once when I did this thing where you color table occurrences based on their underlying source table. And by the way, in the previous video, I bobbled my words once or twice, maybe 3 or 4 times, but hopefully I didn't confuse anyone too much. And I did corrections in the show notes. But anyway, this colorful thing, at least once, the color said, oops, I got that wrong, because I could just see when I did this thing. So that it's a good tip. I like it, very colorful. What's not to like? The naming convention here, I think anyone who does Anchor Buoy, everyone's got their own naming conventions. I went with a very straightforward, I went with the underscore because Beverly Voth had told me that I should never use anything but letters, numbers, and underscores. So I think I'm very safe with my table occurrence names. And what's the other thing I'm gonna add? There's 3 different ways, if I click this, if it wasn't a picture with toggle, 1, 2, 3. This is typically RTOs are this. And other than that, I don't know if you've ever seen a relationship graph where people didn't expand it. I can see everything. So that was our first Fun FileMaker fact. And then I think this was our next one. So that month we were feeling that code readability was really important. And so we did this sort of rhetorical question where the perform find, and this is obviously rhetorical in the sense that this is more readable. B is the correct answer, in case you were wondering. Somebody posted, when I tweeted this out today, somebody posted that this was more performant, or I think they said performant, something like that. And I didn't ask them like how much more performant. In my book, with all due respect to that individual, it'd have to be really much, much more performant because this is just so much more readable. And the added thing that I would say about this one that's not here is that when you're working with code that's in the A, you wind up working with a modal. Let me see if I get this right. Modeless versus modal. Yeah, you wind up working with a modal dialog, where here it's a little bit more modeless. So I just find it easier to populate the Smith and the staff. It's just, I find it easy to work with. A/B, a little A/B testing, and that was the second. Okay, now this one is actually was very, very popular on Twitter, and well, it should be, because I think that this is one of the underutilized aspects of the FileMaker platform. And one of the criteria, or one of the ways a Fun FileMaker fact comes into being is if I'm working with a client and I do something and they say something like, "Oh my gosh, that's awesome," or if I deploy something, working with the text formatting, and they say, "Can you put that on every layout?" Then it's like, okay, I guess this is a winner, right? Because if customers like it and they want it, all throughout their system, it must be good. So that was one thing. And I did drop this into some, not everyone's going to like the same features. Some people, the businesses are different, but these people work with text a lot. They're in the literary field, and the people who are in the literary field obviously like this for a variety of different reasons. They might be formatting text to take it out to HTML or something like that. So the text formatting in general is just like an incredibly useful feature, and I think it's underutilized. That's number one. Number two, one of the things that comes up as an FAQ on Community is this idea of, you're scraping text from a website or an email, and you're putting into the FileMaker, and you're dragging and dropping it, and then the formatting from the web page or the email, HTML email, then the question is like, hey, how come my text is big? And then it's always like, oh, use, let me see if I get this right, text format remove, which is kind of the sledgehammer of these text format. There's 10 of these things, last I counted, that deal with text formatting. There's like 4 that remove and then 4 that add, something like that. But this is one that we often use, which is a little bit less of a sledgehammer than remove all formatting. It's like remove the font and remove the size, but maybe the style is useful and it doesn't blow up the lettering. And and color might be useful. So it's a potentially useful way to go there. And then this is a little bit off in the weeds, but it's also true that should you wish to have the ability to remove styles, in a more granular fashion, that exists. So anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. And actually, I got to, yeah.
Oh, question. Would you want us to chime in during or after each fact?
No, inline is perfect. Inline is best, actually, because it'll keep the whole conversation together.
Are you done with this one?
Yeah, do you want to say something about it?
I noticed the same thing. It's like sometimes it's sometimes if it's just for data entry for me, then I sometimes don't bother with this. But for other users, I have to set this up so it strips out all the stuff just like you're showing here. One thing I've noticed though is like when you paste, if you immediately do an undo, I think it removes just the formatting, and then if you do undo again, of course it like removes the data from the field. I believe that's how it works.
That's true.
Does anybody else notice that?
That's absolutely true. If it's formatted, a single undo will remove the formatting, and the second will roll it back. If it's not formatted, a single undo will just remove it completely. But yeah, that's a way to go.
There's another way to remove it.
I was just gonna
intentionally.
What's the other way?
You, Command Option Paste will paste it without styles automatically.
Yep.
Sure, but I
think
what Tony's driving at here though is a little bit more surgical. That the idea of removing just the font face and the size while leaving things like underline and bold and italics. it's a very, very cool idea.
Yes.
Oh yeah, no, it's very cool.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of ways, and like if, for instance, this would involve touching schema, because obviously you're doing this, and I shout out to this little thing, but it's there. You're doing this on the schema level, on the field definition level. So if someone called up during the middle of the day, you might tell them, hey, do the single undo or do the option paste, and then we do a lot of the schema changes overnight when people aren't on the system. So it's good to know all of the techniques, the Eric, Vince, and these that we picked up somewhere.
Sorry, Command Option Shift Paste V. Sorry, you have to include the Shift key in there. So.
Oh really? Oh wow. Okay. Well, it's good to know them all, and I'm glad you. I tend to do these, but so many ways. So now, all right, so here's number 4. Oh, and anything else to add on that one before we move on? Okay. So this one, I got to say this probably wasn't our finest hour here, but it was not bad. It got us through the month, and it's pretty. The cute little thingies. And maybe we punted a little bit. It's like learn the keyboard shortcuts. But it's not a bad way. When we do pair programming and we're trying to teach people, one of the best ways to teach people keyboard shortcuts is to tell them that, they're all there documented under the menus. And then we picked one. So that was one thought, is like, hey, keyboard shortcuts are useful. And this was back in 1.16. These are chronologically back. I think we started this like 2-3 years ago. And this was, I think, arguably the most popular keyboard shortcut that we could think of for users. And we'd already done keyboard shortcuts in relationship graphs, so we're jumping around trying to cover different parts of the platform. Too much of a good thing. Oh, and then here's another. Like I said, we try and put multiple things in the form factor. This was Command D, and then a little shout out to custom menus. So we have keyboard shortcuts. Oh, and let's see, custom menus. Okay, we got that one. Looking at the chat. The one thing, Matt Petrowsky, shout out to Matt Petrowsky, who did, he did a utility, which I don't have at my fingertips, that facilitated the process of creating custom keyboard shortcuts. And you can do that. Basically, it's a FileMaker front end to something that writes to a plist. And that was really useful. We set it up here. And anyway, just people should follow up on that if they haven't already, because it's a huge productivity thing. And maybe we'll get a link on that at some point. Let me make a note. Link. I'll figure it out, because I'm going to listen to the video to do the timestamp links, so I'll remember. Okay, so that was page 1. That was 4. So keyboard shortcuts, we like them, right? If anyone has any comments, stop me. Okay, here we go. So Fun FileMaker fact number 5. Let's see. Okay, is that size okay?
Looks good from
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm not going to try and overdo it, because then I'll just make it too small, and then I'll gotta. So this one here, this one is a little bit of a spin-off from the code objects of ZRD. And let's see, hold on, I just got distracted. I see Alexi's here. Hi, Alexi. I know everyone's on mute, but hi. What do we got here? This was a spinoff from the code objects of ZRD. And back then I was trying to figure out for myself how to, how to pick which part of the FileMaker code possibilities to use for a given use case. And I was trying to do it by looking at the relational structure that kind of underpins the FileMaker platform. And that's a longer topic, and anyone wants to hear what I'm talking about, just watch the first video that we did, because it's got some decent ideas, I think. But on this particular one, I had to sort of like, hey, do you use a custom function or do you use a script function? And it's actually a decision we have to make a lot. And the short answer, I guess, would be what it says is if you have a multi-file solution, there's a lot of things that work really well as script functions because it's dry. And custom functions are great, but they're scoped to a file, right? A custom function lives in a single file. You can't call it externally at this moment in time. So, so a little bit of a contest between those two. And then what do we try to work into the conversation? This was, I think, at the time that FileMaker 16. So we're validating. So this is an example of a script function. And this is our convention. Underscore means, you know, I'm called from someone else. That's just what we use. That to me, like, oh, it's a called from somewhere else. Val is short for validate, FileMaker 16, or base elements. And post notification, right? Because this was sort of, at the time we had clients on both 16 where they have access to the JSON stuff and before. So a little shout out to base elements. BE is base elements. Because, you know, we're trying to make everyone happy, all clients happy. Oh, so there we go. So that's a nice visual. If anyone has anything to say, speak now, because we're going off to look at a dialogue. So this one.
Oh, hang on. Go back 1 second. Would you say that your use of like, let's say at the time that you did this, I mean, now that you have while, I mean, some of the consideration was, you know, oh, don't want to write recursion in a function, rather maybe in a script. And would this change your opinion to go back to custom functions in the thought of while, or would that have any bearing in this conversation for you?
Well, it would certainly make writing a custom, you know, the while certainly makes writing the recursive custom functions. That was a huge step up. Was it 18, right? FileMaker 18. So yeah, that makes custom functions. It might. I mean, it might skew it. You know, sometimes we're on the fence between these two things. And I even kind of like, I've had a lot of custom functions that I've used, and then I've even rolled back from custom functions, like for text coloring, to just like unroll them because, you know, I go back and forth. I've got certain custom functions that are locked down solid, you know, that I'm not letting go of. I don't know. It's a sort of, it's kind of a little open question. But I don't know, it's a good topic. Some of these are just to put out ideas for people to think about, you know?
Yeah, okay.
I have a question. Is there a performance difference between a custom function and equivalent while loop? Are they pretty much the same, performance-wise?
You know, I don't know. I don't know. I think they're about the same. But that said, you reminded me of something I should have mentioned, which is, whereas a script function is often going to be drier, which is, I think, a good thing. I think about, I would guess that a custom function that's locally scoped to an individual file would be more performant than a script function. That said, I think it probably is not that much of a performance difference. So I would tend to use a script function. I would tend to, you know, like I take the easy way to get the code out the door, you know, to deploy the return on investment. And then I would do something more performant if there was any performance issues. And fortunately, most of the systems we've deployed are just running fine, you know. It's like sometimes you get this performance difference that it's like 1/1000th of a second faster. In other words, it doesn't matter. But I think I think I read somewhere that they're about the same, but honestly, I don't know. I never tested them. But more readable, while is more readable, that's for sure. Okay, so if we cover that one, then we're on this next one, which is number 6. All right, here we go. So show custom dialog, kind of a bread and butter. It's a great script step. It's easy. It does have some sort of gotchas, and this was sort of to address the gotcha, which is that we can't control, as far as I know, the built-in show custom dialog script step. We can't control it. What does that mean? We can't control how big this window is. So one day I was playing around and I just shrunk it as much as I could, and I discovered that you know, the user, if I could shrink it, users could shrink it, and if they had, so I could put text in the dialog that people wouldn't see. So it's just kind of like, hey, don't make your text in dialogs bigger than the smaller that a user could make it. Plus, you shouldn't make it that long anyhow. And then I think later on I discovered that when I did 4 lines, and I believe I later discovered there was like a change in the operating system or a change in the FileMaker version. Actually, let's say it was the operating system. It was Apple's fault. That I think it was only 3 lines. But most of the time I try and keep the dialog messages like super terse, you know. And then we're just playing around to get this all to fit. We sort of play around in, I think, relatively creative ways to tell the story. So we're just using the dialogue to tell the story. So anyway, don't make your text too large because the users can shrink. And the other riff on this is that I think the custom, when you're picking, oh, how am I going to write this message? These days, used to be we only had the custom dialog, and then we had this, you know, creative layout dialog where you could pop a layout as a window, and then we had popovers. I'm seeing Erica's cards. I'm just going chronologically here, and then we had card windows. Card windows we had, and they gave us even more. And we liked them so much we did a whole infographic, 8.5 by 11 infographic about card windows, the year that they came out. So anyway, 4 choices, and we use them all. Not all at the same time, but they're all good. So that's show custom dialogs, and Eric says, don't forget card windows. How could we forget card windows? And anything else to say about this one before we move to the next one? Okay, that was 6, and then 7. What did we do next month? All right, here we go. So this one is like I was saying earlier. So I was doing some pair programming with a client, and I was just minding my own business, and I did a constrain find. And the person I was working with said, holy smoke, that's great. And this was someone who was, I'd say, a very talented FileMaker developer, who'd, you know, been doing FileMaker for a while and hadn't seen this awesome feature called Constrain. And then it's like, why is that? Oh, because it's kind of hidden. It's kind of hidden under a menu. It's, you know, not enough room for everything. So, you know, I'd sort of like, wow, I guess this is a pretty terrific feature that maybe needs a little bit more visibility. So we gave it some visibility by doing this Fun FileMaker Fact. There is a 2 ways to use it, at least 2 ways. One is if you do a selection, it will constrain based on that selection. And it works really well. I mean, it does clever things like it works on email addresses. You know, it handles the diacritical, you know, the little @ thingy. And I see Eric's got a tip, and I'm going to agree with that. yeah, so go through the menu items in FileMaker. It is a good, yeah, I mean, check out what the platform does, because it does more than a lot of people think. And what was the other thing? I don't have a visual on this. We did build a little kind of user interface to present all of the finding choices, the constrain, the extend, the refind, and so forth and so on. And we make it a little widget on the upper right-hand corner. I don't have FileMaker open because I've got kind of too much going on here. But anyway, it's an awesome feature, constrain and extend. And when I deploy it to solutions, it's one of the ones where people say, you know, I put it on one layout, which is a sort of a typical strategy. Is like I'll have a feature and I'll deploy it at least once on the theory that they might like it where I deploy it. You know, I'll try and pick a good spot, and they might like it so much they ask to have the same feature on like lots of layouts, and that means they liked it. And this is one that is like, can you do that more? So this was a winner as per customer, and Eric gives it a thumbs up.
Tony.
Yep.
Just on that one before you you switch, not everyone realized, but the Constrain Found Set and all of those, not only are they available when the user is in find mode in the request menu, but they're also available like you're showing here as an option of the contextual menu when they right click. So that's a great thing. The thing that, and I don't know if it has changed over different versions of FileMaker, but a bit like the quick find, I think it does shortcut the or short circuit the some of the triggers. So if you're handling some stuff with the triggers that are tracking if the mode is changing from find mode to browse mode or browse mode to find mode, so exit and enter mode, I think it's skipping over those, so it can put a wrench in your in someone's code if the user starts using those.
Interesting. That's good. I hadn't heard of the script trigger ramification, so I guess there's something to test and look out for. Maybe there's a gotcha. That's good. Good points. Okay. Any other things to riff on this one? Okay. Cool. All right. So this one. So this is this falls into the category of be nice to your users. And let's see. So what are we saying here? And it's kind of hard to explain, but with the visuals, it's kind of easy. So this is preferences, and you know, by default, it's usually by default. Well, not usually by default. I think I'm pretty 99% sure by default it's system, but you can click other and you can enter the name, and the name feeds into this. So if you know, every time somebody gets the password prompt for the main menu or the home screen, the home file, whatnot, is they don't have to type their name over and over. And we, for the bigger projects that we work on, or we drop in a file that tracks the comings and goings. So when someone logs in, we know we use the get functions to get the username and get account name. And if they don't match, we just talk to them directly or talk to the you know, whoever we're pair programming with, and say, hey, you'd make their life easier if you did this. And then, you know, we just reduce the amount of friction and the pain and suffering. Oh, and then here's Robert. Oh, wait, it's scrolling. I see another chat there. Okay. So Robert is saying, has anyone made use advanced tools the default? Sort of that's an interesting question. That takes us, I guess, into the assisted install. My understanding is that people were saying, if you want to kind of dial back or lock it down, if you do it in assisted install, maybe someone else can jump in and give an opinion on this in 17. So Robert sees and commented on this little use advanced tool. At 17, it was a single product gets shipped with a toggle, right? So instead of 2 different products, it's one with a toggle. That's my understanding. And then how do you deal with this? And I think assisted install locks it down, but I'd be happy to be corrected.
Yeah, it was, whenever I go to somebody's desk and I have to like troubleshoot, like, what their context is and what's going on there, I tend to just make it easier on myself and just turn on the tool so that I can see what's going on. It has a function, and they can't actually see or do anything unless they're logged in as somebody with full access. And so I log in as full access, and I can see everything in their context, from their machine, their network, all this variables and things that get set. It's often easier to do things that way.
You do a relogin?
Yeah. Well, you can do a relogin from the dialogs, from the data viewer dialog or the script debugger dialog. You can do that. I kind of wish FileMaker made it so that they could, from the data viewer, that they could actually see what they're allowed to see. As far as a user goes, the data. Sometimes, we have power users who could troubleshoot some of their own stuff if they had, if they could actually see and do some calculations here and there.
It's a fine line. It's like, where do you draw the line between what people can do? So I got Daniel Harlow says, yeah, assisted install locks. So anyway, it's an interesting little, it's a nice thing to do for people. Pretty easy to do. All right, any other comments on this? Because I'll jump to the next. I think we're doing okay on time. That said, I'm gonna.
One other thing, but on that user preference, most of our users have to log in with a number, because that's our Active Directory is based on an employee ID, and so they're all logging in with numbers. And then the thing is, when I go to the console, I can't see anybody's name. I have to go look it up. And I often tell some of the people to go ahead and put that in there, because then I can see that username in the console. Also, they sometimes use that they have like little signatures and things like that pop up, and we make use of that username for that. And they just tell them to put that in, and you'll automatically make acronyms out of their names and various things that they need to tag various places.
Yeah, and then in that particular, Eric, in that use case, an accounts table, so you're mapping the unique number to a collection of things like a name, maybe an email signature, an HTML email signature, a regular email signature, and so forth. I mean, maybe photos and an accounts table might help you there. Anyway, it's nice feature. Yet another part of the FileMaker platform. Now, this one here about zebra stripes is one that I really like, but didn't do too good on Twitter. But maybe we'll give it a little bit of love here. So I like zebra stripes, and the last video, this is a little bit of a derivative of the last video, where there was a portion where I had a little 8.5 by 11 infographic that I was using to tell customers what I was doing with zebra striping, because it's covered in the video. Used to be a way of doing zebra striping that was more complicated, but in systems that are 13 and above, where we're locked in 13, we're basically, there's an easier way to do it. So this doesn't have the full story, which is in the previous video, but this is just a shout out to this feature that showed up in 13, the ability to do zebra striping with built-in functionality, which is more performant because you're not using conditional formatting, and it's easier to set up, and it tastes great, and it's also less filling. Zebra striping.
I guess my one gripe with that is that it doesn't support, and I don't know what the term is, but when you have an active row that is completely dark, that the text color doesn't convert to like a color that will present in a contrasting color over the dark color, if you know what I mean.
Oh, I do.
You have to
it
always,
doesn't cause the text to invert.
Yeah, and I don't know, with dark mode and all that kind of stuff, I think, I mean, and just in general, even without dark mode, it would be a nice feature to have the fact that like you would have like an option to say, you know, invert text or something like that, because that would be really great. Otherwise, you're always living in a pastel land.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, I've thought about inverting. Yeah, that would be good. That'd be fancy.
Otherwise, the only way you need to do it is you need to create conditional formatting.
Right,
which is
then you're back to
unfortunate.
conditional formatting.
Yeah.
But Vince, I think you can set a specific styling that doesn't use formatting, that relies on the states if it's primary, alternate, or active. No?
Oh, really? I should check that out. That's a good point. I didn't think of that. Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. This is yeah, that'd be interesting to look into, like the text, the styling of the row versus the styling of text in a row.
And I'd like them to handle it like automatically, but I'm curious as to what they would do with gradients.
Yeah, and also it gets real complicated, because then FileMaker Incorporated or Claris International would have to have opinions on what's the appropriate. Because I was later on, I'll show you some buttons I was working on where I was trying to figure out how to do inverted stuff. But I'll hold that until we're looking at that thing. Maybe I'll get some opinions from y'all. So, but I want to say zero striping is, even in spite of its shortcoming, is awesome. All right. So with that, unless anyone jumps in, 1, 2, 3. Layout object names is next. So this month, or the month that this was produced, we thought that layout object names would be an incredibly useful thing to give a shout out to. So a couple things. One, they are indeed unique per layout. If you try and do it, you'll get like, portal name too. What are they useful for? Oh yeah, they do seem to be the best practice for entering a portal. I will confess that there have been times in the past when I entered a portal by go-to field, but that would be potentially brittle code if you were to have a filtered 2 portals, one of which was filtered, or both of which were filtered. You could create ambiguity as to where to go, whereas the object name is unique. So my more recent code, for years, is enter a portal by go to object. Let's see, name a button. Yeah, with a button, you give a button an object name, and you can use, from memory, let's see, what is it? Layout object attributes, I think it is. So you can get the size and the position and the left and the right, and you can make the picker window show up next to the button on the right or the left. So object name's good for portals, good for buttons. And if you want to address a unique instance of a field on a layout, maybe you have, so in my purchase order table, the purchase order ID is the same as the purchase order number, because I'm not picky about enforcing sequential purchase order numbers. So then when I have a little button that copies, I maybe wanted to copy, to go to field that's on the upper right versus field on the lower left, if that makes sense. Anyway, unique instance of a field, because you can put the same field on the layout twice. So those were 3 uses. You can do more, web viewers, but that's what, etc. You can do all kinds of other things with layout object names, but we kind of running out of space. We needed to leave a little bit. The go to object script step will get you there, in case you're wondering. Oh, and there it is, layout object names. Okay. And this is a little shout out to the fact that if you use the layout object names and you don't specify the field name, it actually seems a little bit more robust because it doesn't get confused if you have those two files open with the same name. But this works, otherwise we wouldn't have put it. We're pretty careful about what we put on these things before we send them out. And that returns the layout object names. Okay, layout object names, they're awesome. So that's all I had to say about
What
layout
do
object names.
people use that layout object name that lists out all your objects, right?
That's useful. We actually have a what can you use it for? Oh, we use it. We have somewhere. I think we're going to bump into it. We have a little bit of a validation function. Excuse me, a validation script that we run every time we do a go to object. We have code that precedes it that passes the object name into a little routine that looks to make sure that nobody moved the portal, nobody renamed the portal name. You know, before we decide that we're going to go somewhere, you know, we want to, if somebody like removes a button or renames a button or duplicates a button and the object name changes, you know, which would break the code, we're like, hey, we were expecting a portal with a name, portal name. So that's one thing you could use it for. It's a big topic. There may be some other things that I missed. Feel free to jump on in. Okay, so we object names are awesome. And we got some more about Crufty object names with a shout out to the feature that showed up, the layout object window. Is that what it's called? Object window. Okay, so this is just, so FileMaker RESTful integrations are awesome. Slack is one of the ones we like a lot. Great for notification. Nice way to, easy way to build notifications into a system, like an entire infrastructure. Nice freemium model. So you can help propagate the use of Slack. Competing with Microsoft Teams recently. MailChimp, New York FileMaker per user group, we use that. Twilio, very popular. Shout out to G Suite, Basecamp. We just did a Basecamp thing, Office. These are just some of the big ones, and thousands more, obviously. Not shown, we didn't show them all. But, you know, just as this was circa FileMaker 16 when the RESTful integrations were really kind of taken off big time because of the 16 JSON stuff and the insert from URL, which has kind of gotten stronger and stronger over the years. So just a little shout out to that. So that's RESTful integrations. And I think we all obviously realize that they're massively important. And we could probably talk for days about them. All right, so then the next one, this was, okay, this was the end of the year. So we wanted, you know, one of the goals we wanted to do is just have some fun, say Happy New Year. And at the same time, to give a shout out to the idea that you could do custom date formatting. What it's called? Custom date formatting. Custom data formatting of type date. And, well, did you know? Just refreshing my memory what we said. Date fields can have custom formatting. Yes, they can. I actually like the universal format a lot of times. I do like to pad the zeros, pad the month, pad the day. Configure through inspector, common formats, build your own. You know, just a little shout out to this feature. Nice little Fun FileMaker fact, got us through the month. Good bread and butter feature for everybody. Like I said, we do target features for everybody. Like this is not, I wouldn't say that this is an expert feature. It's probably, you know, not even intermediate, but it's a good beginner. Maybe it's intermediate, somewhere between beginner and intermediate. So shout out to that feature. Oh, here we go. Vince has got a comment here. Another thing layout object names are good for is that if you have a complicated layout, you can quickly locate an item if you know its name. That's true. Yep, that is true. Absolutely. Okay, and then here we go. Next one. This is once again derivative of the code objects as ZRD, just sort of like my overview of quite a lot. But now this is sort of a drill down into, and I think a bit of a polish up on a particular area that comes up when we're doing pair programming with people, I'd say, advanced developers, or just, developers who are actually writing code. Just sort of explaining the conceptual model of layouts that they sit on top of table occurrences, which in turn set up on source tables, which is a linguistic differentiation from a base table, because a source table could be in the same file, which is what we call base table, or it could be an external data source, which could be either FileMaker or ODBC. And, I think we're using decent language. I'm sure that there's people who use different phrases for these things, but internally, when we're talking amongst ourselves, sometimes we'll just be consistent and make differentiations between source table and base table versus table occurrence, just to kind of make sure that we're talking about the same thing. This is kind of core, super duper important. I was talking with someone recently about anchor buoy and sort of explaining, hey, if you use, the primary table occurrence and you put the layouts on top, everything gets a heck of a lot simpler. And that's what I do, and it's kept me out of trouble. Okay, so that's pretty cool, useful, maybe. Oh, and here we go, script folders. This was a super popular tweet. And I have to say, this is, I think, a feature that is underutilized compared to what it can do. And it has a really high return on investment, really high productivity return, because it's easy and really simplifies things. So everyone's got their own, style of organizing things. I'm on the kind of like, I try and keep it one layer deep. Although, I know everyone does it different. Some people do two. I've done sometimes two. But one thing that I did, so let's see, I'm just going to read it so I don't forget anything. Script folders are great. Nice little visual there. Introduced in 9. So most people can use it. And if you're on 6, you can upgrade. You'll pick up this feature. I was naming folders either by functionality or by if you look at the script steps and how FileMaker Incorporated, Claris International organizes them, we're sort of mostly following their model. Well, navigation is an example of that. The screenshot, I didn't show everything, but we have one for editing and one for sorting. Whatever, I don't have it up here, but whatever FileMaker has for their categories, we use those. And then shortcut is for the top 10, and work in progress is right underneath it, because I usually build my scripts initially close to the top so I can get to them. And then later on, I might park them and file them away once they're working. So yeah, name folders either by functionality. And this is our convention. It was like, hey, what am I? It's like, oh, keep on looking. It's kind of like mirroring this with a little click. And I think it's also important, or it used to be important, maybe still is, not to name your script folders the same as your layouts. So this guarantees that the name of the script folder is going to be different than the name of a layout, because these are sort of a layout under the hood. So it just keeps us out of trouble from way back.
I mean, they're a script under the hood.
Yes, that's right. They're script under the hood. Yeah, layout folders are layout under the hood, and these are script under the hood. Thank you. That saves me having to do a post-production correction. Good point. Keyboard shortcuts that come into play. Also works with select all. Yeah, so boom, script folders. And this must have been it's a good fact based on the number of people who clicked like when we tweeted this out. We put it out in the email newsletter, and then shortly thereafter, I just tweet it. Make sure people see it. And recently I did some retweets from time to time if people are talking about something. But yeah, once again, thank you, Vince, for that correction. And Anybody else want to say anything about script folders before we move on? They're pretty simple and darn useful. Okay. Then, all right, then the following month, little shout out to clicking a button, click a button with the keyboard. This one's a little bit obscure and probably not the most useful thing we've ever done, but it is true that you can click a button with the keyboard, which actually is good to know because it's useful, and also good to know because it's potentially dangerous. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I don't think it was, you know, this is not one of our best FileMaker facts. I mean, it's true, but it's not awesome. Give the button an object name, use the go to object, hit return. And I was kind of playing around with pick lists and stuff. And great for pickers, maybe. People can always pick up the mouse. It's not going to kill them. Anyway, that's a whole topic about pickers, which is a gigantic topic. We like pick lists a lot. And let's see, shout out to, there was an article in FileMaker Advisor magazine like 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And then there was Wheatbix from New Zealand did a really good blog post on pickers. And maybe other people have written about them, but they're bread and butter. They're difficult to set up, but once you got the code patterns, they're easier. Easier the second time, harder the first. Nature of programming. Let me move this. Okay, snapshot links. And this is actually a pretty awesome feature. Underutilized. Let's see, covered it quite a bit in the previous video, and you can find it once again from the timestamp links on the video, and that'll be in the show notes. So I'm gonna try not to repeat what was said there, but you can take a snapshot link, drag it onto a text editor, and you can see the underlying XML, and you'll see that it records a whole bunch of things and more, because, you know, it's a fun FileMaker fact. These are, as someone said earlier, we're just trying to kind of whet people's appetite here and stick within the form factor. And, you know, we're hoping and expecting that people are going to drill down and say like, well, that seems intriguing. Let me go see what I can do with that. So that's the and more. And here's some use cases. You can use these with your customers to, you can email them as an attachment. You can save them in a container field, and I find that incredibly useful. One of the things I could have added, if we'd fit it, we could say, once you have a snapshot link in a container field, you can do, oh, by the way, I'm a fast talking New Yorker. I hope it's not too bad. And with the recording, you can play it again. And if you're in a hurry, you don't even have to put it on double speed. Saved in a container field, then you do export field contents automatically open, and you got a good little dynamic duo there. Save it in the container field, export, so you can pass found sets around through a table. And we do that, and it's incredibly useful. You can share them through Slack, Dropbox. They do kind of compete with FMP URL protocols, which can be configured to do things that are quite similar. And they're sometimes the FMP URL protocol is incredibly useful. And I talked about that in the past video, because that to us is an incredibly, you know, we like those a lot, obviously. And we do have the diagram about how to use FMP URL protocol and not have to kind of memorize all the punctuation rules. And that's on our website. Let's see, and this is an example from our help system. And oh, this is like, look, I guess that's a him, is passing a found set to these people over here using a table and a snapshot link stored in a field, like it says. Use cases, contacts to call, projects to reviews, FileMaker 11. Like I said, there's really no excuse not to use it, FileMaker 11. And if you're using 6, you can upgrade. And it still works in 18 and 19, I'm sure. Okay, so that was that. So before we move on from the awesome snapshot links, anyone wanna, oh, there are some things to miss. The snapshot links, they do respect security, which is a good thing. Doesn't make everyone happy, because let me see if I get this right. I'm pretty sure that if you have someone who clicks on a snapshot link where the status bar is locked, maybe hidden and locked, the snapshot link would be like, no, no, no. I guess maybe just locked would do it, maybe locked and hidden. Anyway, there's some condition of this status bar locking whereby the snapshot link will respect the privileges that are implicit in that decision. As well it should. So that's a bit of a gotcha, but I believe that the implementation is rock solid. They did the right thing. Security.
I guess I would add one thing, Tony.
Yeah.
And that is, I wish we had the option to not have it not open a new window sometimes.
Oh,
and I
yeah,
wish,
Yep.
you know, if you take it a step further, I don't know, like if instead of sending a file, we could send the data with a, send snapshot link records or something to the server, then everything that people talk about a saved found set or whatever. That,
Yep.
Let's say you find 30 specific records and you want to process those rather than all the techniques to scoop up the IDs. Why not leverage something like this that we could then run on server to get the records that you were just looking at and in the order that you were looking at them in. Anyway,
Hold on, I just said Charlie's jumping. So hey Charlie, thanks for stopping by.
No, super excited to be connecting with you all. Thanks so much, Tony.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then I'm gonna circle back to what Vince said. I'm just trying to keep up with the chats that are happening in real time. So Stephen H says, I believe snapshot links respect target client permissions regarding seeing restricted records. And yeah, I would imagine that that's 100% true. Yeah, that's a good point, a good addition. And then, Robert's agreeing with what Vince said, not opening a new window, and Robert would vote for that. So I've got, in the meantime, I think I'll say this now, one of the techniques that we've been doing is gathering up record IDs. We have a field that has the record ID. We actually have two, one stored, one unstored. And once again, Weet-Bix, New Zealand, said, a record ID unstored. And I think, Clay, something about record ID, the data is visible on the H-band layer or something like that, which I don't totally know what that means, but it's fast to gather record IDs by doing list of, which I believe showed up in 13, and targeting a field called record ID. So list of record ID, and you get links. And then you can take that and feed that all into an FMP URL and pass that around. And we have done that, and it does work. So it does some of what a snapshot link will do, whereas it can reproduce a found set. You can have it go to the layout. You can have it go to the file. And this was in my previous video. You cannot get it to do the sort order. That seems to be unique to the snapshot link. You can't, you could do this current record, I suppose, but you can't do the sort order. But we have done that. We have passed found sets around with an FMP URL protocol where we just take the record IDs and flip them into a bit of a pipe delimited array or dot delimited, anyway, it's complicated, but it works and it fits a use case. But I too would vote for this feature to make a new window an option. So if FileMaker's listening, there's a lot of votes for snapshot links that replace the window, I guess the window in the file that we're talking about. That would be good. Okay, so obviously it's a popular feature because a lot of people are hoping. Okay. All right, so I think we covered that pretty good, unless anyone's got something else on that. All right, so we're page. Okay, here's from Eric. Here's a fun GoToMeeting fact: Shift hyphen Command M, or I guess that's Shift plus or Shift Command M, mute unmute. Okay, that's cool. All right, so here we go. Trigger. This was popular. This sparked a whole debate on Twitter. So let's see. Let me set it up. Automatically, my favorite use case for this is, so we have an address table, unified addresses, and one of the, obviously it's got, for a system built for the United States, just to keep it simple here, just to make it, or, whatever country you're building it for, you're gonna have city, state, if any one of those change, if you had geocoding as fields in an address table, like we do, we have lat long. If anything changes, like if the zip code changes, well, we just wipe out the geocoding. So we essentially we cache the geocoding results, and we don't do them again and again. We just do them once. But if the street address changes, the geocode is going to change. So we know so that would be a good example. That would be one of many possible examples to have a field get triggered when, and this is the code, just there's different ways to do it. We use the let. You could do it with evaluate. I like let because it doesn't use evaluate, which is an indirection function that you got to watch out for. You got to use that carefully. But that's what we do, and it clears the field. I think that's what we said. It's easy to set up. There's no indirection because we don't use evaluate or get field. This works, so we use it because it works. And no script triggers because we do it on the schema level. And we do tend to do stuff on the schema level because it's dry, and then we can just build. We don't have to worry about like, ooh, we forgot a script trigger on that layout. But we do like script triggers also. I think I'm overdue for a fun FileMaker fact about script triggers. Anyway, so we've seen this pattern before where you clear this checkbox and then clear geocodes. Yep, trigger field for external syncing. Yep, we did this for a project where it was a FileMaker. It is a FileMaker Ruby on Rails integration where if a field changes that needs to be pushed up to the Rails app, then if one of those fields changes, one of many fields changes, it clears the flag and the robot picks it up and it pushes it, and it keeps the FileMaker in sync with the Rails app. So that's one use. And and then we do this as well. I mean, these are all legitimate uses. We didn't just make these up. What do we do here? We record when an important field was modified. This is very popular. Someone modifies the field and it automatically enters the date or the timestamp and the initials that, we set up a global for the initials. When the user logs in, we just set up a field with a global pulling from the address table. So you can get that. It's like, who modified that? And it's very granular. It's not like the modification, the modification, which is great, the feature modified by account name, which is great, but this is granular. This gives you granular modification functionality. So trigger, it's an awesome feature. And that's all I know about it. There was a little bit of debate on the Twitter about different ways of doing it, which I'm sure are fine, but it's all good, different ways that work. Okay, so that's the trigger. Now this one is actually pretty technical, but useful. So I sat down one day and I was like, wow, it'd be great. What was I doing? I was refactoring some code. I wasn't happy with some variable names that I was using, and I was using them in a bunch of places. And I wanted to change the names, but I was a little scared that the calling script would, be passing in the wrong things. So I wanted to be able to kind of have a little bit more of a debugging chain, because we have this thing where a script calls a script, calls a script, let's say, or maybe a script calls a script, calls a script. Hold on. Oh, this is a good question. All right. So, all right. Vince is saying, did I update this? What you see here? Did I update it to use JSON? And here's where we're at. We have customers, and I have to say, since last year, I get to bump up the numbers a little bit. Last year, I think I said we have customers on 13 and 12. I don't think I had 12, but we don't have any customers on 13 anymore. So we're one version, but we do have customers on 14 and 15 and 16 and 17 and 18. So we are using 6 fried rice for internal variable passing, or internal, what do we do? When we pass a dictionary around, we tend to use that pattern because it's part of our code generation library, and it works for all our clients. We definitely use JSON, obviously, a lot, but this could be adapted. I might have said that somewhere. You could just, this whole pattern, the essence of, I think, what we're doing here is we're, let me see. I haven't looked at these since a year, but I remember it's a call stack, right? So we're just passing the stack, and darned if it don't. And then this is probably the more complicated thing, but you pass the stack from one script to another, and as the stack builds up, the call stack variable builds up, and as the stack unwinds, as you have like a script calls a script calls a script, and then it's like, the stack grows and then shrinks in that type of situation. It just works. And I probably can't explain it too much better other than the fact that it does work. And you could probably do something to add a button, to make it more robust. But this does give me the ability, if a script calls a script calls a script and something goes wrong, it does give me the ability to see where the trouble started. But that said, if FileMaker Incorporated were to ship a get call stack function, I'd throw this out in a heartbeat. But in the meantime, this is useful for passing the stack around. And yeah, it could be done with JSON. Just, make sure that everybody's locked in at 16 and above, especially on, base elements, but for Go, yeah, you need 16 for Go. I think we lost, Beverly is signing off, I believe. Okay, bye, Bev. Oh, she left already. So this is going to go into the show notes. Chris Conker has located the community idea for get call stack. I think I voted it up. I'm all for it. So this is just in the meantime. And it's also kind of fun. To be honest, I don't use it that much, but I did have at least one use case where I just wanted to kind of write some code and give myself some early warnings before I was making changes, give myself a little bit of a safety net. Okay, so I think we covered that. Unless anyone's got anything, I'm going to move to the next one. Okay. There we go. All right. So one day we decided, just for the heck of it, to give an opinion on the field naming convention. And obviously, we went into this Fun FileMaker Fact knowing that we were not going to be able to convince the entire world to name their fields the same way we do. We knew that ahead of time. But that said, we decided it'd be fun 1 month to just say, here's what we do. So what do? We embed the metadata in field names. And there's good reason to do that. So here's an example. So we picked name first last to do the, name first last, name first, name last, name middle, name spacing by name, the reverse naming convention. And then S means stored versus unstored. And that's actually quite useful. Like you're looking at a field and you're thinking, oh, can I use this on the right-hand side of a relationship? Well, if it's unstored, the answer is no. Or can I open this up to the browse mode? If it's a calculation, it's safe. If it's not, it's not. So just embedding the metadata, is it metadata? Yeah, the metadata into the field name gives you visibility when you're working in a script, like, oh, I'm going to set this field. Well, don't try setting this field because it's a calculation. So when you're working in a different zone, we have this thing that we talk about or think about, which is like, what zone am I working in? I'm maybe working in the field definition zone. I'm working in the script layer zone or the layout surface, or I forget what the official name is for the script workspace, I think, script workspace or workplace, the awesome script thing. Let's see, okay, browse mode, yeah, oh, I said it over here, okay, field stored, can you relate? That's, can you use it in a relationship? We're trying to be clever there. Meta names are better names. See, hey, it rhymed. Okay, so we try and have fun with these things as well. So field name and convention. Aha, we got Eric says, _CU. So let me see if I know what that means. _C is calculation unstored. Calculation, oh, you say calculation unstored, yep. But is it a number or text? That's what I would say. And then all right, and then are you in the, Eric, are you in the suffix mode or the prefix mode? Because
Yeah.
there's a big dispute.
We used to do prefix and then found out we figured out that we didn't really like to do that anymore. Because I mean, you can sort by type anyway. And
so you're in the suffix.
Yeah. So we don't prefix anymore.
Okay.
Because I saw a presentation by Soliant, and I pretty much liked their convention. So I said, okay, well I'll pick that one. There's so many different ones. But.
Yeah, I like, and this actually sort of was a subliminal message here, is that I like suffix because name first. To me, human readable left to right for most of the languages that FileMaker ships in. Human readable left to right, therefore user friendly. The suffix is kind of more the developer thing, so it should be a bit of an afterthought in my opinion. So yeah, I'm in the suffix camp. And then Vince says the flavor of the month. You could change it every other month. But yeah, it's like Gulliver's Travels, Big Endian, Little Endian. If anyone's read that novel, it's like big battle over how someone eats their soft-boiled eggs, whether they open the soft-boiled egg on the big end or the little end. Apparently, the source of much conflict in Lilliputian land. Probably didn't pronounce that right. Yeah, and we got a joke here from Stephen H. The wonderful thing about standards is there's so many of them. We need more of them. Another joke. Okay, so I think we better move off field naming conventions because that's probably multi-year debate. Liquid layouts. So by the way, everyone doing okay? And we're doing okay, I think. If anyone needs a better than no standard, that's true. All right, so hey, liquid layouts this was a winner, I would say, measured once again by the criteria. I put this on one layout for a client, actually for a bunch of clients, and it gets it scores well on the, hey, can you put that on more layouts? And so what is a liquid layout? So liquid layouts, I think the official name is like anchored layouts. What is it called? Auto-sizing layouts. But I think liquid layouts is a pretty good name. Nice alliteration, easy to say. And the basic idea is that some layouts, if you're deploying a solution to a customer base that has a mixture of hardware, mixture of screen sizes, then the liquid layout kind of really comes into play, like, because someone might have a big layout and someone short, or everyone might have big screens, but they might sometimes want to have different layouts on the screen same time. So there's a bunch of reasons why someone might want to have, and I grade these out. This is from one of my, this purchase order is relatively busy system because it's, for me, so I don't mind having a lot on the screen. Sovereign, as Albert Herm Alvarez would say, this is a sovereign system where just give me everything. I'm flying across the country. Minimum size. So this is the user interface. I crafted these buttons myself, I think, with Omnigraphal or Sketch, I forget. This does that, this does that, this does that, and this does that. And that's the underlying tech. And this one actually, you can do stuff to make it, leave yourself a little room for the dock. which I keep on the bottom. Maybe someone wants to leave a little room on the right. But liquid layout's very popular, FileMaker 10. And we got Eric with a question here. Okay. Any way to intelligently stretch more than one item in a direction? There are there's some limitations on how much you can do. I mean, you can do more than one item as long as they're all doing the same thing. You will definitely run into times when you're like, I want this to do that and this to do that, where you can't. So I would say I would play with it, and then you'll discover, what you can do and what you can't do. Stephen H, got to go. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for all the FFF-ish. Fun FileMaker Facts. So yeah, liquid layouts is fun. I will say it's usually easier to start a layout without the liquidity. If you're going for a rapid build out, and then only deploy as necessary, because once you do the liquidity, it's a little bit harder to what is it harder to do? It's harder to you add a thing, and you got to check that it didn't, what I call a liquidity failure. Like you add a button, and then you got to test to make sure it plays nice with the existing liquidity on the existing objects. So use it with care.
I guess the other problem I have with the liquid layouts is sometimes you want a field to be able to get bigger so they can see more content, but if they have a huge monitor and they decide, a lot of these people they always want to open up the window all the way, and then stuff that's on the same line will appear way over to the right and they don't really, and there's all this empty space in between, kind of like you're in your lower right example, like an extreme version of that.
Yeah, you can, if you use the get functions in conjunction with the move window functions, you can put limits. Like for instance, this more height button, I have it configured not to maximize the window because I have some floating palettes. So when I click a button, it runs the script that uses get screen height and a few other things, and then it just subtracts, I think it's like 50 pixels to make sure it's not colliding with the what do you call them? With the dock and or I have a bunch of floating palettes on the bottom. So much in the same way, you can constrain it. But as long as you have these buttons, at least you're saving yourself the trouble of manually moving things around. Click, 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 and you can program them to to make and just tell people not to go crazy. So it's useful. It's worth working with. We've had popular uptake, I'd say. So that's that. Any other thoughts on liquid layouts before we move to the next thing? Eric says, good tip. Thank you. Ooh, layout symbols. All right, this is pretty cool. And this was a time where we got to do some shout out with sort of a hidden shout out to a pop-up. What's that thing called? A popover. So layout symbols. And they show up on the layout like that. So that's what we did. Did you know? This is a little colorful splash. Layout symbols allow you to put get functions. We do, this is, I like it. That's the spacing I like with get functions. I know that FileMaker out of the box tightens them up a bit, which is fine. But layout symbols allow you to put get functions on the layout, no fields required. So that's cool. I mean, when did they show up? 12. So if you had a system that went from 11 to 12, you might have some fields to do get functions. You could get rid of the fields and put layout symbols instead and lighten up your schema. You can make a little button, a popover button that shows this, that gives you some statistics, could be good for troubleshooting. So yeah, great for diagnostic. Shows different, oh, it's not working. Well, tell me what your custom menu is, because maybe that's the problem. What's your found count? What layout are you on? Oh, okay, because then you could go to the same layout. It's this layout doesn't work. Give me the number, the record ID, just a bunch of things that could be useful. Pairs well with popovers. And here they are. It's under the layout mode, insert menu. Awesome feature. And it was expanded and renamed because previous to that there was like date and time or a few others, but now it's like the whole portfolio is there. Just the whole portfolio, there's a lot there. Lots and lots of get functions are available as layout symbols. So, and I think Tim Neudecker did something on layouts, on get functions, a DevCon presentation where he did some nice demos of how to use them. So that was good. So that's layout symbols. Anyone got anything to say? I think we might have covered it. Otherwise, stop me, because I'm moving on to cleaning up Crufty object names. So this is a feature that showed up in 16. And this is a system, I'm not going to tell you where it came from. But if you look at any of the systems that have been bouncing around for a while, it's not unlikely that you're going to see some Crufty object names. And they used to be really difficult to get to. But when FileMaker 16 introduced the layout objects tool, it became a heck of a lot easier to clean up that Crufty code, which is nice. I did it on my system because, and it does simplify things. And then you have to do it a little bit carefully because you want to delete this, but not the object. So you click to select, you pause for this to highlight, and then you click to edit and then delete. I guess the short message is when you do this, delete the Crufty object name, not the object. So you got to be a little careful how you do it because you can't delete objects this way. So don't do that, just the name, not the object. Okay, be careful out there. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so cleaning up Crufty object names, it's a good thing if you have time and a budget or no budget. Okay, so we did that. And we've got two more of the things that are already out there, and then a little bit behind the scenes of what's coming. Let's see. Okay, and I'm targeting, I think I've got, normally you guys go for 2 hours, so I've got a half an hour. Is that my target? Let's see, I'm in New York, it's almost 10.
Yeah, you got 30 minutes at least.
30 minutes, okay, I'm gonna try and hit that target. Just make sure everybody just hit the target. All right, open a file and run a script with an FMP URL protocol. Oh, okay. So this was sort of a shout out to the FMP URL protocol. And this was like, there's obviously the infographic that we did for the FMP URL protocol. Great for launcher files. You wrap it in a FileMaker. And it's great for launcher files because if a launcher file that uses the FMP URL protocol doesn't create a 661 error. Bit of a long story, but if you have a launcher file that tries to connect to a system without a password, it'll generate a 661, and we already get enough of those. So that's one thing it's good for. Link from a web page. Also, this amazing web viewer round trip apps. And that's only gotten better with the version specific FMP URL that showed up in 18, I think. 16. Oh, yep. Got to make sure it's 16 and up. You got to make sure you got the privilege sets, the little checkbox. We'll see that later. This has got to be checked, and it's locked by default. So when we roll people up to 16, we go around and open them up for some of the privilege sets. So that's an awesome feature. It's been discussed, but this is just, it deserved to be kind of take its place in the pantheon of Fun FileMaker Facts. And then we did want to, obviously conditional formatting is a super duper major feature. And 1 month we said, it's time to do conditional formatting. Heck, it's been around a long time. I think we didn't even put it, it's like FileMaker 8, 9, long time for sure. Now we were careful to use an example that could be used in where it's only once, like not in a list view, not in a portal, because there may be some performance considerations of conditional formatting in a list view or portal because it's many times it runs. But we use it for these navigations, So shout out for the navigation. And then this actually, my coding partner wrote this code, and I looked at it and was like, that looks funny, but it actually is correct, technically correct. Like it looks funny, but it's good. Pick it apart, have at it. I believe it's correct. Looked correct to me when I looked carefully. But anyway, conditional formatting, awesome feature. And you know, it's pretty straightforward calculation, so I'll skip that. Ooh, look at this, warning, what should I do? Be sure your button script handles the disabled condition. Okay, yep, make sure. All right, so anything on that? Otherwise, we'll go and see what is in the works, things that may or may not become future Fun FileMaker Facts. Here we go. And these are queued up in on layouts that say Scratch. All right, let me go back to 100. What was I on here? 100. Whoops. 200? Okay, 200. All right, and I'm gonna go through some of these a little bit fast because some of them aren't gonna make it. I guess that's okay. All right, so I was deploying some code that was going to eventually upgrade, and I thought, hey, look, I can use the evaluate function to write code today that will work in a future version when the get last external error detail function arrives, it will work. It's a little bit of an obscure example, but we're deploying some help system, and we're deploying it to someone running on, a couple of years ago, someone was running on 14, but we deployed the 16 using the external, the evaluate. So we kind of future-proof some code. It's not every day, but it's kind of an interesting feature, I think. Hold on, I think 200's fine. That still looks good, right? What do we got here? We keep a little bit of a database. We have a FileMaker database, big surprise. A FileMaker database where we track scripts, functions, and script steps. Functions seem to sometimes change name. So this function that is currently called get last external error detail in 18 was called get last ODBC error. And so it tells us, like, you know, as code moves from version to version, this name will change. And then so at 16, and we use this as an example because it was a cool added capability added in FileMaker 16, which is for operations that attempt to lock records, it returns the name of the account, and you can do clever things with that. It's like, who's locking my record? As of 16, you can find out and do something about it. And it was enhanced. So this is our little database to track functions. So we're also kind of, you know, I do this, so I like, at least I know what the functions are. And I was like, hey, I've heard of that. I know what would be good for that. So that's that. And you know, that, you know, not a great Fun FileMaker fact, but it's kind of hard to, you know, it's just an idea. And even if it doesn't make it a Fun FileMaker fact, it's a good fact for internal developer use and whatnot. So this one didn't make it as a fun fact. This one here, let me zoom in a little bit more here. Okay, this one didn't make it, was too complicated to explain as a, you know, in a postage note. Unstored fields do not load until they're shown. And I think this is technically correct. This hasn't been fully vetted, but I think it's true that unstored fields won't load if they're to the right of the render line. Although I think that might have changed at some point, I'm not sure. On a tab panel that's not showing, and behind a popover. I think that's technically accurate, or behind a show object when calc. But don't take that as 100% true. But you know, that would be like I'm trying to gather the facts and then I have to triple check them before it goes out. And part of it's an exercise to make sure I know what the heck is going on. Let's see, next one. Records have an underlying ID that can be exposed using either an unstored or stored calc. So this is what I was saying earlier. We do both. Whoops. Record IDs can change when cloning a file. So they're bad. They're not primary keys, but they're good for short term, like passing an FMP URL protocol or a number that you can read on the screen. Like if you were using a UUID for your primary key and you're pair programming and you're like, what record are you on? I wouldn't want to read a 20-digit or 16-digit, 20, I forget. But I could say, so it's good for short-term use. Not good for long-term use, but good for short-term. So a shout out to the record ID. It's actually incredibly useful. Also for sorting portals. And Chris Irvine on his Scale FM blog had a thing called Tasty Sorts, where I think he's sorting, he recommended and did some metrics that sorting by record ID is tasty, efficient, fast. So, and we do that. And I believe I noticed a difference. I didn't do the measurement, but it makes sense to me. Something about record ID being something that exists on the H-band level. But it sounded good to me. So we moved to using that for sorting, for doing reverse portal sorts. It does seem to have a speed benefit. Okay. I believe I've been here before. Yes, I have. Okay, so let me go to the next. All right, so here's one that we use a lot. It's a little bit, I've not yet convinced the entire world that this is an awesome way to do this. But so a popular thing to do is to count, okay, Tim is happy. Oh, and Vince, thank you. Vince dropped in the link to the Tasty Sort into the show notes. Thank you. And Tim says, got to go, learned a lot. Thanks for stopping by. All right, what do we got here? Oh, the last function. Somebody, I don't know who came up with this, otherwise I'd give attribution. It's using the last function in an unstored calc. And so here, last, ZZ. And with our convention, ZZ just means, hey, the user doesn't need to see this. Record number means that we're grabbing the record number, unstored calculated number. So this actually works, and it gives you the count. And it works in the browse mode, it works in the find mode, it's equally fast, provided that you're working with a relationship that is unsorted. And I did some tests that are on Community. And so it's kind of, I think it's the best of both worlds if you're working with an unsorted relationship. And so that's what we use. And for the price of one little field that's unstored, that's inexpensive, if it's not on the layout, it apparently costs nothing or close to nothing, maybe nothing. So we like it. We like this. Try Tide. Oh, here we go. Tide for fast, this technique for displaying, and it also works in the find mode and requires an unstored. Okay, I should read these. So I guess repetition is the mother skill. Okay, so this was one that didn't make the light of day because we use it. It's custom formatting for dates, but we thought we were better off highlighting the conditional formatting in a non-controversial fashion where it wasn't in the list view, wasn't in the portal. So then you get away from the whole performance considerations. But this seems to perform quite well for us in list views. I haven't gotten any complaints. So conditional formatting and also a little custom date format there, I believe. But we kind of covered this, but this was a candidate that basically got supplanted by a different way. Here's one that I think would be a good one. This is kind of on the short list. These layout badges that got introduced, I guess I had to look it up before I put it out there, but these are pretty cool. Obviously you can turn them on or leave them off, but they're incredibly useful, especially the one on button down here, script name and parameter. So you might see this as a future Fun FileMaker fact. These are the icons that FileMaker uses. Badges. Oh, this is the same thing. Tooltip for badges. They're called badges. Yeah, they're called badges. And then here's the layout. And this is sort of before something becomes a tight Fun FileMaker fact. We kind of like do screenshots and try and figure out what the heck we're gonna fit. Let's see, Eric says, hold on, we got some catch up here. Maybe FileMaker, okay. Can we hide show all badges? I think, I don't think so. I think it's sort of more granular implementation. And it's also, this is a set before hosting. These things are set before hosting. That would be an awesome feature if FileMaker was going to do. That would be one of the features that I'd like a lot, the ability to not have to dehost a file before changing the settings. To have the file open with the layout preferences. Robert likes that. Okay, so there's a groundswell for that feature, and it's it's just a key value pair. Wouldn't be the hardest bit of code, but hey, put it on the list, guys and gals over there at FileMaker. Okay, so more things. Your idea here. By the way, if you have a fun FileMaker fact that you would like to see, feel free to drop it in the drop it in the chat. And let us all keep in mind that one of the competitive advantages of the FileMaker platform is that it integrates both desktop and cloud functionality, giving it a compelling advantage over other platforms that are cloud only. So FileMaker Claris International has got a portfolio of technologies that work synergistically and give it a profound competitive advantage against other lesser software vendors. So buttons. So this was, I had fun with this on the previous presentation. We only really had buttons in 12. And that's true. Before that, we had grouped objects, and then we have true buttons. And we have been migrating grouped objects on systems that were built prior to 12. We have been migrating grouped objects to buttons, either as it comes up or sometimes proactively, because it's easier to work with a button versus a grouped object. So we thought about that. Then what do we got? Custom function. This is we had Christian and his partner or his team were going to come to New York. We kind of got that meeting got postponed. They were going to be here last month. So we were working on a Fun FileMaker fact when he booked like 6 months ago, and we said like, oh, we'll do this. What do we got here? This is a Monkeybread thing. Don't look for this in your built-in version unless you got the Monkeybread, and it gives you the ID. So with AppleScript, you can, if you get, hold on, I gotta read that. If you get the layout ID, you can use AppleScript to navigate to a layout using the layout ID, which is interesting because you can do it with AppleScript, not with FileMaker. So you can take this ID and you're like, oh, I want to go to layout 83. And you can use an AppleScript to do it. So I have a little AppleScript, and here it is. And it's pretty short, so you could just type this in because it's there's no sample file here because it's just it's too short, but it works. Oh, and there you go. So boom. And here's a custom function. We're using the tilde naming convention from FileMaker standards, GetLayoutID, a very verbose implementation of this function. Lowercase because FileMaker does uppercase, so we differentiate visually. What else do we do? Underscores. Well, anyway, it works. And that's a bread and butter custom function for us that we use quite a bit. Another idea available. And then we got Robert here with, I never remember the keyboard shortcut to select all objects of the same type, select all labels, all fields, that if you click on the corresponding tool and then corresponding thing and then hit Control A, we'll select all object. I'm sorry, I'm not reading this very well. I learned recently that if you click on the corresponding tool and then hit Control plus A, it will select all objects matching the selected tool. Okay, that's cool, good tip. And That'll go into the show notes. Let's see. Just going to paste myself here. Okay. And here we go. Pick up the pace. Get quick find text. Let me zoom out. Okay, so this subscript, this was just scratch for the, this got picked up with the layout symbols. This is just some random text to help. This is omnigraphal, makes it easier. Get script ID. You know, get script ID and get layout ID. We use them a lot. We use them for the help system and stuff like that. So those are good. I thought I should do something on quick find. This one, there's some potentially good ones here. So we had this thing about fewer comments. By the way, since the last video, I took out a lot of comments that I've been using in FileMaker 6. I realized that with the colorful code in the script workplace, 14, 15, somewhere in there, I didn't need quite so many comments. And so I just took out comments. So fewer comments, because why? You can use variables. What is that? Send mail. That's a comment. It's a variable and a comment because it's so well named. Same thing with a script. That's a field called locked, if contact locked. That reads. Why do I need a comment? That's awesome. This one would be fun to do. We were playing around with the SVG icons, and this is the hex code. And so what I was working on is like, and I think I got this right, that if I write my SVG correctly, I can have the best of both worlds. I can have an icon that is colorful in this interface and yet responds to the conditional formatting possibilities, if I got that right, and the styling possibilities, if I got that right. So anyway, that's the potential. Colorful. Yeah, let's see, still be recolored UI with the inspector palette and the hover press, the states, and the conditional formatting. So it must be right. I'm pretty sure it's right. I'm very sure. Okay, and this is another shout out to the global text formatting functions. I was playing around with some layout dialogues for a relatively big Fortune 1000 customer that is, like many Fortune 1000 customers, a little bit behind on versions, to give them some layout dialogues in lieu of the more powerful card windows, which are kind of like layout dialogues, but they're more powerful. But I didn't have that, so I was like, oh, I'll do my own layout dialogues. And then to get the passing style text, I'm like, well, let me just set a global and I'll get colorful text. I thought I'd do something about window, new window. I didn't have much more than like, hey, one day I should do something on that. Insert text was going to do a shout out for the fact that inserting text into a variable is A, it's cool, B, it's apparently faster, according to Mr. Watson. I think might have broken the news on that. So that deserved a bit of a shout out at some point, or at least that's a candidate for a shout out. Oh, Monkeybread, another shout out to the, oh, faster if you append, says Robert. Yeah, okay. The, yeah, there's something there that's worth a shout out. I'd have to go back and dig into it to give it proper justice. And then this is another shout out to Monkeybread. You know, the ability to highlight is useful. And what else is useful? Oh, and the like, this like, hey, you misspelled your variables or something. This is broken. So
And
that's
that's search.
The search over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all. I don't know how many people use the Monkeybread. We use it here, and it seems to be. Yeah, we like it. I like it. Not that I couldn't program without it, but it does make it easier. I was going to do something on grids and guides. That's a gigantic topic. That's just a bookmark. It's like, hey, one day I should do that. I should do something on script triggers. Oh, I was playing around with the code from Kevin Frank that he had done this popover, which is pretty cool code. and we did something based on that. You know, popovers that you can't close, and that seemed to be a potential thing to talk about to cover both script triggers and popovers. Although this like too big. Some of these are like, yeah, we're not going to be able to do that in the form factor available. This was like a, you know, naming convention, value index.ci. I think I was one day wrote this and I was pretty happy with it. A little dot syntax, showing like a little pilcrow, and just a bunch of ideas in one custom function, plus not a bad custom function, super readable. Bit of a bread and butter custom function. So that's in the queue. And look, it fits. This one's almost ready to go. Here's one about building letter text and email text, different ways to do it. Single pilcrow, double pilcrow. Thinking about doing that. Here's like, hey, make sure you click that checkbox. Although having looked through the others, this is probably redundant because we already touched on that topic. So we should cover new ground. This is the same as before. The code looks like the result, input looks like output, easier to debug, just coding style. And then script menu is awesome. You cannot call a script with a parameter. You can use GetLayoutTableName. Oh, this is a coding pattern that we use, and I haven't seen this out in the wild getting as much attention. But the idea of like, we use command 1 to go to the main menu in a multi-file system, command 2 to go to the local main for the table context that we're on. And this is, it works because it's keyboard shortcut, can't give it a parameter, don't need a parameter, I just grab the table name, and if my conventions are good, it works. So that's a potential one. Shout out to the scripts menu. Nice little use of the get layout table name together with a nice anchor buoy, which is what we use almost always. Prohibit modification. Oh, this is a feature that is very powerful, used in conjunction with other, but this is security, so I ain't gonna talk about it. Stay safe. This was a user interface pattern I was playing around with, and this goes a little bit to what Vince was saying about inverted text. I chickened out and I just went with white as the inverted text because I wasn't clever enough to figure out what would be the perfect inverted color. But this was like, I was experimenting to see if anyone that we're working with thought that this was an awesome way to take a complicated layout and make it less complicated without splitting it into multiple layouts, because we're lazy. But it's like buttons that you click this one and it clicks this popover. So you could have like, you know, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all in a kind of like a little cheat sheet, upper right-hand corner, let's say. And then due to the nature of a FileMaker layout, the steps might be like, go to the left, go to the upper left, go to the right, you know, just to try and craft an interface. And we're playing around with colors. I don't know if this one is going to make it into the wild, but I kind of like it a little bit, but then that doesn't really matter so much. I need customers to like it because that's what really counts. But I like it. I'm a customer. Email message. Oh, you can keep a file from closing. So that's Fun FileMaker Facts. Many that are out there, many that are coming. Faster, need an animated FFF GIF. Okay, yeah, we might do. So what are we gonna do with these? Eric said need an animated Fun FileMaker. I thought about that. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this presentation, you know, assuming the recording goes well, there's no glitches. Because I went through everything sequential, I can do the timestamp links, and then that'll be, I can have a link to the Fun FileMaker Fact on Twitter, and also to the portion of the audio, because my thinking was that, or my thinking is that the audio might add some nuance, enhancements, detail to the fact, and that would be the most efficient way to, if I did that, and then I think I would have paid my debt to society. Also brought some of these to DevCon, printed. last year. Don't know what's going to happen this year. So that's Fun FileMaker Facts. And, you know, once again, if somebody's out there running a user group, FileMaker user group, and wants to use these in their, you know, in their mailings, if they're doing HTML email, feel free. So any questions on any of the above, or any Fun FileMaker Facts you'd like to see? You can always reply with your favorite Fun FileMaker fact on the thread, the primary thread, I guess, which is this one here. You know, thanks once again, alphabetical by first name, Eric, Steve, and Vince, and anyone else, and Claris for hosting the GoToMeeting tech and all that. And other than that, hoping everyone's staying happy and healthy.
Yep.
And
thank you so much, Tony. This has been great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Lots of fun. Okay, everybody. So I think at some point the recording's going to stop.
I could stop it any time you want.
Steve manually stopped.
Oh, you know, the one thing, hold on just one sec. Let me, Eric, how do you do, I'm going to just grab the chat before it disappears, if I have that ability.
I do the same thing, yeah.
Okay, so let me just do that.
Yeah, you can.
Well, you can do it too, you know. Anyone can do it, as a matter of fact.
I think it saves it in the.
Yeah. Okay, I got mine, and Eric, you got yours. I'm gonna put it in my email later because
the meeting 1080. Leave the meeting.
Okay, all right. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Tony. Have a great night. Thanks again. Bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.